All right. Dillon Taylor, thank you so much for jumping in. I'm pumped to jump on a call. It's been a while since we've had a conversation, so this will be fun. But let me introduce you first. Dillon is a retired Marine Corps officer where he previously was assigned to infantry and then moved into Special Operations Officer with Marine Special Operations Command. He served 7 tours overseas, including 2 tours in Iraq and 2 in Afghanistan. Dillon retired in 2018 and moved to Jackson, Wyoming to start his post-military career with Snow King Mountain Resort. Dillon spent 6 years in the business community in roles focused on business operations, project management with Snow King Mountain Resort, Figure Technologies, Sitka Gear, HQ Digital, and most recently, Wide Sense. He's overcome business challenges in the COVID-19 era and is now striving to become a licensed mental health care provider. Dillon was recently and is more so recently about to graduate from Walla Walla University's Master of Social Work program. He plans to start his, or this is a little bit older, your education and transition into a full-time in-person program over the next couple of years, which you've already done that. So that's awesome. Dillon grew up in rural Montana and after leaving the state for 20 years, returned in 2019. He is working towards his degree in licensure and has a vision to support fellow SOF veterans, those impacted by trauma, and the greater rural Montana veteran community. His drive to become a therapist stemmed from his own struggles with PTSD, TBI, servicing in his post-military lives. Dude, glad to have you.
Thanks, Chris. It's good to be back on with you. I know it's probably been 6 or 8 months since we've had a chance to talk again. So happy to be here. Yeah.
Full
Yeah.
circle too. So,
Yeah.
the other thing is when we started the pipeline program coming up on, I want to say 3 years, you were the first one that was like, hey, I want to be a part of this. And here you are about to graduate. So this is awesome.
Yeah, I was thinking about that a little bit today. Because I got accepted to school, but I kind of took a year to get some things straight for myself, which was super helpful to get prepared for school. So I kind of jumped into the pipeline program, started kind of talking to folks, and then started school a year later. So here we are kind of towards graduation and seeing Soft Network where it's at 3 years down the road and the number of clinicians that you have in the network and all the different podcasts and all the educations and trainings, the pipeline program means it's impressive. So
Well, I
yeah.
appreciate it, man. You guys have definitely helped it out tremendously. So real quick for, obviously we did the bio. Give us a quick snapshot. Obviously, you grew up in Montana, but what led to the military? How'd you end up in special operations? And we'll go from there.
Yeah. Yeah. So I grew up in a small town in central Montana. I mean, population 7,000 or something. It's a kind of rural Montana environment. As we talk about in school, pull yourself up by your bootstraps kind of mentality. I was in wrestling and football, was academically, I would say I was a little bit of a loose cannon in school. Um, and I don't know what it was around my junior year, something inside me just was like, you need to find some structure. You can't keep going down the pathway you're going. So as a junior in high school, I went out and sought out the Marine Corps recruiter. And I remember I told my parents and they're like, what? You're going to do what? And then I actually asked to enlist at 17 and they signed off on the parental release for me to enlist with a caveat of, hey, you need to go to college, which was super supportive from a parenting perspective, really supportive. And I'm glad I did that track because my college experiences, I think, informed me a little different part of the world and kind of helped me as I started to build my career in the military. Graduated high school, went right off to Marine Corps boot camp in San Diego. I was enlisted in a reserve program, so went to Marine Corps boot camp the first summer after graduating high school, and graduated boot camp and kind of started with my first unit in the Marine Corps, and simultaneously starting college education at San Diego State University. So that's kind of where it all began.
What'd you end up majoring in?
Yeah, political science. As a young kid, I was pretty lost. Just like, what am I doing in the world? Like, where am I going? So I'm glad I found the Marine Corps because that gave me a lot of structure, right? I remember like we activated for the invasion of Iraq in 2003, and I was like, oh, okay, this is what I need to be doing right now. Like, this is what my kind of, at that time, my calling was, per se. It, college, I was a partier. I didn't study. I mean, that's just, I just kind of, I was kind of lost in the world at that point in time, and I didn't know where I was going to go. So when we activated for Iraq and went and did that, I actually got combat meritoriously promoted in Iraq. And I was like, actually, I'm enjoying this. I mean, all the stuff that comes with deployments and the trauma and all that was all building, but in the background. But it was something that I was successful at. I really appreciated the team, the people around me, all those kinds of things. And I started to realize, like, oh, this is something I think I want to do more and more and more, because I was in a reserve program at the time.
Yeah.
So then kind of came to graduation from college when I got back from the first deployment to Iraq, and I was like, okay, what am I going to do? And I had gone to OCS already, kind of before deploying to Iraq, to set myself up for the possibility of taking a commission. And when I graduated, I was like, yep, this is what I'm doing. I'm going to take a commission. So yeah, that's how I ended up in the Marine Corps. And then you asked about special operations community. So career track for the Marines at the time. So I joined in 1998. So the Marine Corps Special Operations Command didn't even start with Det 1 until 2006, right? So I'm already kind of well into my Marine Corps career, graduating from college, commissioned as an officer. I go to infantry officer course, kind of right out of our basic officer course. So I go become an infantry officer, get assigned to another infantry unit, and deploy to Iraq for a second time, and then come back and deploy for a Marine Expeditionary Unit right after that. And at that point in time, I actually looked at the CIA, I looked at a bunch of different other organizations, and then the MARSOC thing kind of popped up on the radar. It was starting to become more and more prevalent in the Marine Corps community. Like, oh, hey, there's this opportunity. At that point in time, I decided to apply and go to selection. I got selected in 2009, actually, after I got back from a fourth deployment to South America, where I took a det down there. So I got back from that, and then I went right to selection, just a few days after, or sorry, it was a few days before that deployment. That's right. I went to selection, and then I got done with selection, and 2 days later, they're like, hey, you're going to go to South America for 3 months. So I got to South America for 3 months. I came back from that. And that's when I got selected, and I went over to ITC and went through the pipeline. So
Cool.
yeah.
So what led to transition? I know a lot of guys, it's a lot of different things or a combination of things, but for you, what was it?
Transition out of the military. Yeah. Yeah. I think for me, at the time, I was married, and we were talking about family. I actually got this at the end of my active duty career. I got selected to go be a recruiter in the state of Louisiana. It was when all the floods were happening, the hurricanes.
Yeah.
And we were going to Baton Rouge, Louisiana. I remember we both turned on the news, and Obama's declaring it a disaster zone. My wife at the time was from Montana, and she's like, I don't want to go to Louisiana. This is going to be horrible. And it was funny. I kind of went through this kind of soul search for self. I actually flew up to Montana to go bird hunting. And this is an interesting story. I get a call from a general officer because he had heard that maybe I was going to turn down the Marine Corps recruiting selection, which in the Marine Corps is a pretty big deal in terms of kind of career path for officers. And I just remember saying to him kind of towards the end of that trip, sir, I understand where you're coming from, but this is about me and about my family. And I've been doing this, I think that was after my 7th deployment, and I was just tired. I was ready to be kind of done with the military and focus on family. And also, that was obviously a very difficult decision to come to in terms of who I was going to be beyond the military. Yeah. So that was kind of the storyline behind the transition.
So, where along the lines did you get interested in potentially pursuing clinical mental health? Like, when did that creep up on your radar?
Yeah, yeah. I think, we talked about in my bio PTSD and TBI. Um, it- it- those diagnoses, obviously, I kind of want to caveat a little bit on Christopher's work and, your podcast with him and some of his trainings in operator syndrome. I think at the time, that's what we knew, right? So those were the diagnoses that I received. Either way, I needed help. And so I actually went through a process, and like a lot of veterans, divorce started coming into play, substance use, a lot of those things were starting to affect my life. This kind of loss of sense of self and connection to others, through the teams or through the military. So this kind of identity crisis in a way. It's also kind of midlife, right? So it's almost midlife crisis in a sense. So you got all this trauma, you got all this stuff mixed in. So I went and found a mental health provider, and she was, I mean, she's like in her 70s, just a Buddha of sorts. And I remember we just went in there, and she would challenge me. She'd be like, why are you being like this? You can move through this, And we did some EMDR work, and she just met me in a place of like connectivity to the trauma that I'd been through, but also she had a ton of life experience. And that's when I started to think about, like, wow, this is really helpful for me. Like maybe this is something I can do for others. And at the same time, I started making friends, either veterans or even kind of community members. And I just noticed they started telling me these deep stories, these struggles that they're going through. It's like, oh, you kind of have a connection here, um, in a human environment that's different. And I think a lot of that comes from our experience, our training, all those things. And I know we'll get into that more later. But that was how I started to think about, all right, I think I want to make a change. And then the business environment, as you talked about, I was in multiple different roles in the business environment. I just wasn't finding passion or purpose in that. And so that led me to say, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to move towards the counseling field.
Part of why I want to film some of these interviews with you guys is
Mhm.
obviously there's individuals that are in that position, right? They're either about to transition or have transitioned, and they're looking around and maybe they're thinking about, hey, maybe I'll pursue something in clinical mental health. For you, what was the process of selecting a school and a discipline? Obviously, you landed on social work. Walk us through a little bit about that and how you might, counsel somebody that's in that position right now.
Yeah, I think I was thinking about this a little bit from the perspective of personal preference, right, versus like availability of what's there in the community. What I would say is in Montana, there is a number of schools actually, surprisingly. So we here in my hometown, we have a mental health program, a marriage and family program, and then we have this social work program at the University of Montana. That's like kind of a part-time deal. And then the program is a full-time program, both a town close by, but the social program. And I looked at all that. Part of the influence for me was a local teacher aspect. So I went and interviewed with some of the teachers here locally in the mental health and the marriage and family program. And quite honestly, I was a little turned away by just kind of how I was received and some of those things. And being a little later in life and kind of having some career experience and things like that, I was able to make connections and meet with a lot of folks. And then I went and interviewed with the social work program and the teachers there, and I got to see the students in it. And they actually invited me into a course, and I got to see, yeah, and I got to see the group that was there and the different experiences. And it was short, but it was enough to give you a flavor of like kind of what you're getting into. And I really appreciated that. And then looking at online programs and some of those things, I think for me, I wanted to be in person. I really wanted to share experiences with others. I wanted to be challenged, and quite honestly, to be challenged in a way that's outside of kind of that military construct of being in person, right? Like everybody around you has the same background and all those things. So I really appreciated the social work interview process, and then seeing the students in that cohort and getting to kind of know them just a little bit, and that really determined my selection of that program. Uh, I would say also what I noticed in curriculum, like looking at the different curriculums, the social work for me, kind of my SOC background, the MARSOC background, you have some training in, UW or FID, or, it's human focused, right? Culture focused, a lot of those things. And the social work program really focuses on that, right? So that was a big part of my choice, kind of from a curriculum perspective as well.
For, you're about to graduate, which is awesome. Whenever we have students, prospective students, whatnot, they ask the good, the bad of our program, or our experience, right? And so for you, are there things that you're about to wrap up? Are there things that you wish maybe you knew, or things that you would have done different? Obviously, it's somewhat fresh, but again, going kind of counseling and speaking back to those that are behind you, what are things that maybe you wish you knew about the program or about just social work in general that maybe you didn't know ahead of time? It doesn't necessarily have to be bad things, but maybe insights and takeaways that might help them in their selection process.
Yeah, I think in some of this is assumption, and you can maybe add a little bit in this. Some of the other programs, obviously, not having kind of more exposure to them, I don't know
Right.
specific focuses. I enjoy theory. I really enjoy theory. In a couple of the ones that connect to me are Jungian theory and existential. So those are two that I just fell into. It's like, the social work path is very broad. So you kind of get a spattering of a flavor of just multiple different things. So you get all the theories, right? And it's like one course. And that one course covers, history, right, of theory, essentially. And doesn't even incorporate, some of the Eastern thought or different processes like that, but just, kind of Western psychology model of theory. And it's a spattering, and it's not super focused. My understanding is there are programs out there that could focus on some theories that maybe you would be interested in more, right? Whether that's Rogers theory or, whatever. So I would just encourage. I did a lot of Jungian reading before going to school, so that was a connection for me, right away. So I wished I'd had more of that flavor, and it's also really deep stuff, right? It's kind of it's complicated, it's complex. I mean, that's one of the Jungian aspects. It's complexes, right? So from a school perspective, it wasn't going to go there. I would say you got to be willing to understand, especially if you're kind of in that deeper world, that like school's going to kind of be on that surface level, really just trying to give you the basic skills and those things. And you have to explore that personally or through a mentor or through supervisor, as you go through your process.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, that most students just don't understand, right? Because you don't know until you go through. There's an undergrad in social work, and then you can get a master's in social work, but specifically with like counseling, marriage and family therapy, even clinical psych. Yes, you can get an undergrad in psych, and all of those programs will kind of give you the language for the greater field. But to your point, most master programs that I've learned about, that I've explored, are fairly general. And so you do just kind of get a broad overview. But to your point, yes, I was lucky enough, and I didn't know what I was doing at the time either, but there are programs out there, brick and mortar and online, that hey, if you're really geeked up and you really want to dive into a lot more theory, then maybe the person that's hearing this, you look for a program where you have an entire semester on CBT, you have an entire semester on Rogerian, you have an entire semester on structural and strategic, so on and so forth, because they're out there. And I think that's maybe another thing that individuals just, you don't know, is it's not like engineering in the sense that if I get an engineering degree from state college and then an engineering from a state college 2 states over, it's probably really similar. In the clinical mental health field, you may have faculty that lean more towards one particular theory over here and a different theory over here. And so the flavor of those courses and the overview is going to be radically different. I mean, obviously within the realm of clinical mental health, but it's definitely going to have a different approach for sure. The other thing that I thought was really interesting that you and Max did, which I think I'll be curious if Kevin did as well when I interview him and Ryan, is you guys went and interviewed people. And Max was very similar. He was at a Vanderbilt opportunity where the applicants met online and met with some of the faculty. And for him, that was a transition. And then he found a different school. But yeah, go talk to the faculty. There's open houses, there's WebEx meetings or Zoom meetings that you can meet some of these faculty. But I would encourage exactly what you and Max said. Go and meet some of these faculty and interview them. You're going to be working with them and close with them. If you really can't connect with them early on, that's probably a good indicator that maybe that's not the program for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think to your point too, when you interview them, you can ask them those questions, right? Like,
Yeah,
what theories do you focus on?
absolutely.
Yeah. What do you see me gain from this program? Yeah, interview them.
Yeah, I tell my students, I just actually, before we jumped on, was wrapping up one of my internship 2 classes. And of course, they're really folks, they're about to graduate as well. They're really focused on, hey, how do I get into the field? Do I join a private practice agency? All that stuff. And one of the things we talk about in getting them a state approved supervisor is you need to interview them. You're probably going to be more closely aligned, or they're going to probably have the greatest influence on you as a clinician because you're going to work with them for at least 2 to 3 years to get that independent license. And good or bad, that person is going to shape your career tremendously. And so I push very, very hard, like, go interview them as much as they're interviewing you, because you want to know that, one, they have the qualifications and the specializations that you want to specialize in. But two, like, where do your worldviews align? Where do they differ? Is that going to cause any friction? And at the end of the day, can you sit under that person and glean as much as possible, because they're going to have a huge impact. So that was a great point.
Yeah, and I think to your point, the practicum or internship space is really where the learning occurs, right? You get the basics in school. You're going to have to write papers. You're going to have to go through all difficulties and conflict with teachers and other students and all those things, which are great experiences to learn from. And, really where you're going to kind of grow and learn, especially in that second year, is in practice or internship, right? And I just kind of a little sidetrack with practicum. I encourage, and a lot of schools say, hey, you got to get into one and stay there, right? Because they don't want to do the paperwork to change your practicum or whatever. I encourage explore multiple ones. And the reason I say that is I got the opportunity, and in our program, first year is kind of hands off, very much observation role, a little bit of hands on towards the end. And then second year, you're diving into, actual client sessions or agency or whatever. In my first year, I was able to work in palliative, and then I went to psychological emergency services at the hospital. So I got to see all the presentations of, extreme things, right? So schizophrenia,
Yeah.
psychosis, all that stuff was coming in, substance use at a heavy level. All that was coming through there. I got to see it. I got to actually start to step into it as the practitioner. So that was just wonderful experience for me to kind of learn where I want to be. And then moving into second year, I was able to find a practitioner, a man that is a body-based therapist. And I was like, this is interesting. And so I, started under supervision with him in my second year, and it's really grown now.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And I echo that. Practicum and internship, as broad of a base as possible. Post graduation, for those that are still kind of unsure of where they want to specialize, I still say go as broad as possible so that whenever you do specialize, if you finally decide, hey, I'm going to work with couples, hey, if you've seen, a handful or a dozen individuals with bipolar and then a couple comes in, you're going to be really sharp at assessment and potentially realizing, hey, this guy's got bipolar, and doing the proper assessment and diagnosis and, treatment plan along with the couples work. Whereas the individuals that hyper focus on one thing, they may be ahead of you in their career arc, right? Because they've had more time to focus on that specialization. But I really think as a clinician that you're going to catch up to them because they don't have the general exposure that you have. And so they're going to take some lumps further along in their career, whereas you're going to take them early on learning that broad base. And so no, I echo that to all my students as much as possible because I think it's so valuable.
Yeah, and it's low consequence, right? You're in
Yeah,
practicum. Yeah,
exactly.
it's your opportunity to make mistakes. So yeah,
100%. Yeah. And even post graduation, I mean, at the end of the day, yes, your license is there, but the reason you have a state approved supervisor is if something goes sideways, you have supervision. And so to your point, yeah, low risk, and the learning curve is steep, but what an awesome opportunity. Um, ultimately you can come out of grad school feeling competent to a certain degree, but yeah, get that exposure because by the time you get that independent license, which is usually 2 to 3 years post graduation, you're at a point where you really start to feel dangerous as a clinician. You feel like you've got some real anchor points and you really know kind of your way around the woods. So